here at the Museum of Sonoma County. And thank you for joining us virtually this evening for our program. I guess we're all sort of getting used to this. We've probably done lots of these things now, but so just a couple quick usual Zoom housekeeping things. For the most part, keep your mics muted. You can enter your questions into the chat, which somebody's already entered a greeting there. And we'll try to get to them all if there are lots or not. During during the program that'll be called out if it makes sense, or if we'll catch them at the end in the Q&A. And also, if you don't know, it might be best to be in your speaker view instead of a gallery view in the upper. That's in the upper right. So those are with those things out of the way. And just real quick before we start our conversation with Alicia, just to give this program a little bit of context. This program is part of a series of conversations associated with our exhibition, our current exhibition, From Suffrage to Me Too, Groundbreaking Women in Sonoma County, which, you can't come and visit in person at the moment, but we do have lots of opportunities to see it on our website, including a 360-degree virtual walkthrough of the galleries. So please take advantage of that and check it out, because this program tonight is associated with that exhibition. And the exhibit was created in honor of the centennial of the 19th Amendment that gave women the constitutional right to vote. Here I have my nice Votes for Women poster right over here. And but our exhibition that we have doesn't just focus on the suffrage era. It kind of takes you from the lead up to the California suffrage referendum, which gave the women the right to vote in the state in 1911, but then all the way up to the present. And so that's kind of what's probably different about our exhibition. And then within each era, or kind of historical era, the exhibition explores the efforts of groundbreaking women and kind of the backdrop of that particular era. So you get a sense of what the obstacles were and what the issues were at any particular given time or era. And then we cut across women in all kinds of arenas, whether it was politics or law, cultural preservation, community organizing, and union rights, as with Alicia. So Alicia was included as one of the 20 or so women featured in the exhibition. And so that's why we're extremely glad to have her here to talk directly to us. So I'm excited to talk to her. It seems like a lot of you know her to some degree. And if you've ever heard her speak live or had a chance to speak with her, you know her. She brings incredible positive energy and passion to whatever she is doing. And she's been, long known for her fiery and inspirational speeches, I would say, at rallies and public demonstrations. Alicia is a lawyer, a teacher, president of KBBF, right? And a labor organizer since 1986, whose work has impacted the lives of hundreds of Latino workers and others and their families in Sonoma County. And I'd say her life is pretty well intertwined with really important parts of our community and foundational parts of our history. So Alicia, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. So I think we're just going to have a conversation, about your life and experiences, if that sounds all right, or if you'd like to say something real quick. And
no, I think that sounds good. I think what's going to be hard for me is that I think this is the first time that I'm actually doing a very nice conversation here, so that hopefully I won't get up in a little bit and start yelling and and rallying us all. So I'm gonna refrain from doing that. I'm gonna try to just make sure that I'm sitting at someone's home across the table and talking to them, so that because that always is the thing that worries me. Is I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna go full blast here talking.
Hey,
Anyway,
once or twice let loose. Hey, I think it'd be great.
yes, and yeah. So no, I mean, so for me, this is I really do want to thank the Sonoma County Museum for having the exhibition, and also it's wonderful, wonderful exhibition. I think everybody should go and see it. It's incredible, the contributions of so many women throughout the century. So it's wonderful. But also, to invite me to come in and tell my story. I mean,
Yeah,
how I got to be where I'm at, and
yeah.
so,
So, yeah, I would say, I mean, it seems like a great place to start is at the beginning. So, don't you?
yeah.
So, could you maybe talk about a little bit about your early life and your parents and where you grew up and
Oh, okay. Well, my parents were farm workers in Texas, and I, even though I wasn't myself involved very much with in during the 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 whole thing of the with the farm workers a lot. Like I know some people who they work out on the fields because it was cotton. When my parents picked, it was cotton. It was very hard. But I do want to tell you that one time my father did took my brother Alfredo and I out to the field, and said that being a farm worker is an honorable profession. And he goes, and if you choose to work on out in the field, you can. It's an honorable profession. And so my brother and I started out doing that a little bit. Oh, but before even he said that, but if you decide not to, it's okay. If you want to go to school and do something else, that's okay too. So of course my brother and I went out to do a little bit of cotton picking. And I don't know if ever you that any of you have done that cotton picking. It is incredible. Just to get you have a big sack, and you put this little kind of fluffy little things in there. You think I'm never gonna finish this big bag and have it weigh anything that's gonna count. But anyway, it scratches your hands and everything else. I think I probably lasted maybe less than maybe I was probably 7 years old or something, because I had already started school. Anyway, I I probably lasted half an hour, so whatever. And I said, oh my gosh, I told my dad, I love school. I'm going to love school. It's gonna be wonderful. And that's it. And but so I grew up my parents were farmers because we moved from what? We just, we followed like either the crop or a job my father got, and so, and my father was also a baker. So we used to move a lot. So one of the first things and going into school that I didn't know English when I went into school, and one of the first things I learned in English to say after a while, after moving around so much, was that I came to realize that the white kids in those days, I didn't know I didn't distinguish white or mixed, but anyway, I used to say certain kids do not follow us. I don't see them in the next school. So I realized that they spoke English, so I learned to ask them. The white kids, I would go up, and the first words I started learning English was to say, "How old are you?" And then I would go to the Spanish, the Mexican kids, and I say, "¿Qué grado estamos?" What grade are we in? Because at one point I had lost track of, I had to align the my age with the grades that I was in and everything else. So that became something that for me through the years was really hard for me to tell someone how old I was. My fourth grade teacher, who had an impact on me, was she remembers when we were in class, and I even can still feel that tension, that she was calling out the names of the people. And thank goodness, and saying the name of the person and saying, is your birthday, blah, blah, blah. And, I noticed that everybody had the same year except me. I had a totally different year and date of birth. And so she came, thank God that my name is Sanchez and it's an S. And I was sweating, I was getting so nervous. And she remembers that she said all of a sudden she took a break for recess and she says, here came a little dark, skinny brown girl with long hair and said to me, please, when you call my name, please. I said my name, and my name is my middle name is Alicia, but my first name is Berta Alicia. So I said my name is Berta Sanchez, and please, my birthday is 6/21, 1951. Please don't tell them that it's different from the others. And she said, okay. I looked so frightened. When we came back from recess, she called out my name and she said, so Berta Sanchez, is your birthday 6/20/21 something? I don't even know the year of that at that time what it was. And I said, yes, thank you. And she remembers that how frightened I was. She also helped me get promoted to another year so I wouldn't be so behind. Even then I was still behind in school. But during all this time too, what happened when I first came into school, um, very young in my probably my first grade or whatever or second grade one of the times I this is in Texas. I was born in El Paso, Texas. So in Texas the school systems I I would come home with my hands all red and the back of my legs red too. And so my mother would tell me, what happened? Did you fall down or something? I said, no, the teacher hit me with a ruler in my hands and my legs. And my mom goes, well, you must have done something wrong. And I said, I think so. I probably did something wrong. I didn't say that. But then when kept going to school, I kept realizing, wait a second, I kept telling myself I'm at fault and it's because I talk too much and and so I said maybe that's why they're hitting me. But then I realized that the white kids didn't get hit when they were talking in class. So all of a sudden I realized that it was only the Mexican kids that got hit. They what got called because when we started talking Spanish, we were not allowed to talk Spanish, but the teacher would take us in there and not knowing even half of what you were saying, you just put out your hands. You would motion for us to put our hands and we get hit and then the legs. And so all of a sudden, what happened to me during that whole time, in combination with me being older than most of the kids, is that and people don't believe this, but I became extremely shy. I became very extremely shy, and I didn't want to talk Spanish. I came home and told my mother, I said, nobody's going to speak Spanish here. Alfredo, my brother, is not going to speak Spanish, and my other brother. I have five brothers, younger than me, and I'm the only girl, as they say. And so my brother Alfredo and my brother Angel. I think my brother Angel was too young, but anyway, I came home and I told my mother, nobody's going to speak Spanish anymore here. I'm the only one that's going to speak to you, and I'm going to translate to Alfredo in English because I don't want Alfredo to know Spanish so he doesn't get hurt. And so, but with all of that came like a shame for me not knowing Spanish. And being older than the kids. And then as I went into junior high, um, I used to do a lot of in front of the classes. I would get a lot of extra credit. I would get up and do extra credit because my father insisted. My father really cared for education, but he also insisted because I was the oldest and because of uh, his faith in women, and I will talk later about that part. But his thing was that I was going to, in a sense, take the family out of poverty because we were very poor, and that I would be the one to and he also said, I just don't want you to suffer the way I suffered being poor, because my father was born in Mexico. My mother was actually born in Oakland, California, but during the 1930s, her whole family got deported, and her siblings, who are all U.S. born, got deported. They went to Mexico. They sent to Mexico, and so anyway, during the depression, and so anyway, but and she was raised in Mexico, my mother. But my father really came in many ways, was very, very poor, and used to tell me about his stories. And so he said, no, you got to, education is the key for you to get out of poverty, and maybe to take us with you, but not really. It's just for you not to suffer. You will not, I don't want you to cook. I don't want you to learn how to do anything. And his dream was that, and every time I talk about my dad, I can cry. Um, he would say, every year, one day you're gonna be so rich, you're gonna be so rich that you're gonna walk in and turn in your last year's Cadillac and get another new Cadillac, and you're gonna have people comb your hair and cook for you, all these things. My dad, he goes, you're just going to study. So anyway, because of that, I I came home one day and said at the age of 11 that I was babysitting some law students, and I loved law. And from then, I was the last time I had a say so. My dad said that I was aimed to go into law school and become a lawyer.
Yeah.
So that was his dream, right?
Oh,
But so to me, then what happened is that he because we were, like I said, really poor and all of that, and also the emphasis, I'm sorry to go back, the emphasis of education, I would get up and give these reports.
yeah.
I, because of my accent, especially the kids, Mexican kids, would get so angry at me, after the ones that maybe that knew English better than me, and then after words, they would be laughing. If I made a mistake, they would laugh while I was making my presentation. And then when I went outside, they would beat me up, because they would say, why you do that? You embarrass us. It's horrible that you do this and everything else. But I kept thinking, well, I'd rather get beat up by this kid that in my head, my dad was such a gentleman, but I was kind of scared. And I said, I don't want him to kind of do something, I mean, I was afraid. I don't want to disappoint my dad, so I kept tolerating. But during that whole time, I ended up becoming extremely shy, ashamed of myself. I didn't want to speak Spanish. I was ashamed of that I was brown, that, and everything. So I became really shy, and always afraid. And so in 1969, like I said, we lived in Texas. Then we moved to New Mexico. Then we moved to Tucson, Arizona. And then in 1969, we came to California. And at that time, I used to be in top classes and English classes, and so I used to, one day, the Mr. Jack Murphy, a teacher that was my Spanish
Oh,
teacher,
yeah.
and Mr. Jack Murphy, and uh, incredible man. He said to the whole class, well, I would like for you guys to take a poem and or a story, and then get up and tell about that story in front of the class. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I'm in a new school and this thing. Well, I said, it's okay. So I went home and I told my father about this, and my father, and that thing, I wish I could remember the poem, but I think it was from Plato and I think, for some reason. Anyway, uh, I told my father, I read him the story, and then he and I talked, and he went over it, and he started to talk to me about it, and just a memory of him helping me with the story. And he said, well, talk about what does it feel to you? This is what it feels to me, blah, blah, blah. And, and then the next day I went into class, and it was my turn to get up in front of the class, and I stood there and I said, oh, my stomach was like this, and I was ready. I was ready. I said, I'm gonna take the laughter because my, the way I talk English, it's okay. I'm going to take it. That's okay. And then all of a sudden, I just started to talk about what this poem meant to me.
Yeah.
And when I go and talk to young people in schools, I tell them that the person that they see now was born on that day.
Oh, yeah.
Because on that day, when no one laughed, when I was talking, nobody laughed at me. They were crying, they were feeling something or whatever, and then after I finished, they applauded me, and the kids, these were my classmates, and so I told people that at that moment is when I realized that, you know that how you talk, it does not matter if you make mistakes.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you talk with an accent. It doesn't matter if like you mispronounce something and whatever. It's if you talk from your heart, if you just talk, that's what counts. And from
Yeah.
that, I told young people that I said, this is why it's so important for you to just talk from your heart, not fake anything and not care what other people say.
So yeah, that's a perfect segue, I think, maybe to
Yes.
a little context here. I'm gonna share my screen here, and we're gonna play a quick bit of video. That was a perfect, I think, segue to this, and we'll talk a little bit about the context of the world you were coming into there when you came to Sonoma County. So, all right, here we go.
And we organized the Mayo chapters, Mexican American youth organizations, and one of our stars was Alicia Sanchez. And Alicia tells a funny story that one of the things that we did every year was, I had friends of mine in Mexico City, and we chose one student who would go to Mexico City and stay there for a month and just go around and see all the wonderful things that a student could see in Mexico City, all the museums and archives and so forth. Her father was a baker, and he went to work early and slept late, and so her father said, no, you can't go. And so she said, my father won't let me. So Mr. Murphy, the Spanish teacher at Santa Rosa High School, Jack Murphy, and I and Alicia went to her father, woke him up, and she said, Papa, the padre is here to see you. And so I got up, and so I pleaded with him. I said, this is an opportunity. And she said, okay. So she went. And so I haven't seen her for a long time, but we became
She's still around.
She's still around, I know that, yeah. So that happened, and from that, and then Candido would go and do some leadership training with these. We went most of the high schools in Sonoma County. We organized, and out of that we held the first student retreats at Sonoma State, where we brought in, and through my contacts, and I brought in some very prominent Mexican leaders in the state, like a man by the name of Bert Corona, who was well known nationally, and a very enthusiastic, motivational speaker. And we had just tons of kids there. And we did that for, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 years. And we were involved with the farm workers, of course, supporting the farm workers. I picketed and been in my Roman collar and all this stuff with picketed Safeway. For years later, I wouldn't go back. I just wouldn't go to Safeway anymore. But we organized a bus of local Hispanics, the farm workers, and we went up and marched the famous march from Delano to Sacramento. We didn't march from Delano. We met the march halfway there, and then we onward. And George has a famous picture of Caesar himself and myself in his office.
That's so true. That's so true. That story is so true because, I mean, actually, I was even thinking about this. They showed me the clip yesterday, and it brought so many memories of when my dad, when they were walking Mr. Jack Murphy at that time it was Monsignor Cox. He was Monsignor Cox, and they were walking toward in the by the driveway, and I woke my dad up, and he goes, "What the heck? What's going on here?" and everything else. But he finally, but he did tell them if something happens to my daughter, you better watch out, and everything else. But I came back and actually it was a wonderful experience going to Mexico because I ended up going to the place where my mother was raised. So I got to see, a little bit of where my mother was raised, and so it was just a wonderful experience for me during that time.
Yeah.
And so, to me, I want to talk because when he was talking about the farm workers and all that, my mom, well, after my father died, then we did go and march with Cesar Chavez too. But before that, I graduated from Santa Rosa High School at Santa Rosa High in 1971, and so I got a full kind of like a full scholarship to go to the University of Colorado. But they said in order for you to come, in order for us to know if we're gonna finance you, finance you through the whole thing, we need you to come during the summer. So I graduated from Santa Rosa High School on a Wednesday, and I was on a plane on a Friday. My father even got really sick because my mom said he didn't get out of bed for a week. He was so depressed, and so my brothers and everything. So on a Friday, I was on a plane to the University of Colorado in Boulder, and that following Sunday when summer school started was my birthday, and it was on so I went to classes on June 21st, 1971. I going to classes, and I'm like, so happy. So I'm trying to meet someone and to people. And I said, oh, you know what? Today's my birthday, and hoping that, people will say, oh, well, come and let me get you some coffee or, get a cookie or something, anything, and all that. So I went out and, of course, I always tell people that when you say, today's my birthday, not something that most people will say then, well, how old are you? Right? So I said, in my head, I said, I had just turned 20. And I said, but I'm not going to say that. And, I said, I'm not going to lie anymore because I used to lie since I was very young. I'm not going to lie anymore. I'm going to tell the truth now. And I said, I am 20 years old. And they said, oh, that's wonderful. So you've been out of high school for 2 years. And I turned around and with a straight face, I said, yes, I have been out of school for two years. I didn't want to tell them that it's only been 2 days, but I said 2 days, 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's good to point out too that with the context in which you were there and sort of recognized by Monsignor Cox, and that's really, it's 1969, right? That's really only 5 years after the Bracero program, which brought thousands of Mexican workers that left an imprint on Sonoma County. So was the source of the people that Jerry Cox and then also George Ortiz, right? Who unfortunately lost just not too long ago.
Yeah, I know.
Who were organizing, right, the community that was there. So that was the moment that you were there.
Oh yes, too.
That was really kind of being started, because then you even have, that's the period, of course, when UFW forms and like Cesar Chavez. And so that's a really kind of important, crucial time period, I would think. Don't you think?
Oh, yes, it was. And also George Ortiz and Monsignor Cox did a lot for the community here, the Latino community. And Jack Murphy did it in school. He was the one that helped us with the Mayo Club. And it was the first chapters of the Mexican American Youth Organizations. That's what Mayo stood for.
Right.
And they were in the high schools, and then in other colleges, it used to be MECHA or UMAS, which was United Mexican American Students in Colorado. That's where I went. And but during that time, exactly that is that they formed, for example, the Latinos Unidos. which is
Yeah.
still now, they gave scholarships. I was the recipient of that scholarship.
Mhm.
They used to do a lot of that. They used to have Mexican dances where all the kids would get together. And so they did a lot, both of them, for the Latino community. And it was, for me, they were, my mentors. And during that time, when that's why uh, Mr. George Ortiz, he used to always say, um, when now that when we're older, he would say, "Call me, call me George," and I said, or Jorge, and I said, "I can never do that," I said, "You're Senor Ortiz," and that's all, and that's the way I always treated him. And Monsignor Cox, it was very hard for me. I had to change to call him Mr. Jerry Cox, but I used to call him Jerry Cox. But the full both names, because it's out of respect for them. They knew me when I was young, and they had faith in me that I could do something. So when I went off to college, in many ways, I always tell people this is part of my transition politically, is that it was during the time of a lot of, what the Chicano movement being
Yeah.
born. And so I went off to college, I always say, as a Mexican American, and in the way, by that I mean, and I shouldn't say that, but the way of being, of saying, um, oh, look at all the suffering I did. I did all this suffering. More, I shouldn't use this words maybe because it makes it look bad, but for me, Mexican American I didn't have the consciousness of why it was more individualist. I was thinking more, I did this on my own, blah, 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 and everything else. And when I went off to college and I got to be there, there was a movie I saw, and again, I cannot remember a movie that had such an impact on me. But I came out of the class from that day and went straight to a United UFW,
Mm.
a picket line. And I literally picked there for about 4 or 5 hours. It was in front of a liquor store because they were boycotting the Gallo wines. And so I stayed there and picket and all that. And I always say that the Chicana was born there. I view myself as a Chicana. I was, because I became conscious, politically conscious, that it wasn't me on my own that I made it here to the colleges. It was people before me who had fought to make sure that higher education was available for people of color and poor people. And I knew that I had to continue following in those steps. So I used to go to picket lines and do all of that, not as actively as involved as I could. I then went from college off to law school and came back to the University of, to San Francisco, Hastings. And at that time, my dad always felt that, he said, I wish I hadn't wanted you to come back to California, because I wanted you to be, I feel like you're not focused. You're focusing on us too much and the family. And I think you need to focus on your studies and all of that. And I said, no, because I would come and visit. And he said, uh, but one of the things I wanted to say is that my mother was very, when my father didn't like the word Chicano because it was used very derogatory toward him, like the N word for Black people. So he didn't like it. And in the days before, and my dad was also in the 40s, he was bracero. And he went to New York to work on the railroads and all that before he met my mother. Anyway, the thing is that when he found out that they said, "Dear Chicana, you're being welcome to the University of Colorado," my dad got really angry and said, "No, you're not going there. How can you take having them be so insulting to you?" And I said, "Dad, it's a new world. It's a new thing that's happening." But of course, we got into a little argument, and I went into my room, and but I'm leaving. I'm going still. And he said, "No, you're not." And I went in. My mother went into the when I was crying, and she said, "You gotta go. You gotta go, because you gotta let us grow up. We have to grow up, because we're depending on you to do all these things. So because of that, he ended up, I finally, when my mother said she's going, I went. But my mother was a very wise woman in that sense. But one of the things about, uh, and that I want to talk a little bit too about my my father is that I consider my father a very my best cheerleader. My best cheerleader. My father is the one that from very young age he said to me, "No man is more important than you are, except me." And then he goes, "But one day I will not be as important." He goes, "But but he goes, one thing too, he goes, is I want you to know is that you always respect men. You respect your brother, you respect me, you respect, but you need to know that you're key. You're key. Your mom and you and women are key to all the things, the struggles that happen in life. And so and you always need to know that. Never put yourself below a man, but you also got to make sure you have that respect for him. And so with me, I grew up with that already, that solidness of who I was, of being a person that I wanted uh, to be. But it was interesting. My father died in my first year of law school, and he was only 56 years old. And at that time, I came with my mom to the Social Security and to try to get us death benefits for him, and discovered that all the years that my father worked in the field, 30 years in work in the fields in bakeries and cotton gins and cotton fields, that he never got credit for any of that. They said he only had like one quarter in all those years, and so we didn't qualify for any benefits. And my mother started to cry, and she said, how is that possible? Because when I was working in the fields with your dad, the growers or ranchers, los rancheros, they would call, the ranchers would say, $5, Sanchez, $5 for you, Sanchez, uno para Social Security, and they would say to him. So my mom said, where did that money go? And for me, I was in law school, so I was already, kind of like a radical. I had already done sit-ins at law school. No, yes, no, I didn't do sit-ins yet. No, it was in my second year. Because the first year, my dad, heavens forbid, at first, I always said that if my father had been alive, my father had been alive, I probably would be one of the, probably the rich, one of the highest paying attorney in the county, because that's what he wanted, right? I couldn't, if he only knew that I went on to devote my life for social justice. And I know that he believed in that very much
Yeah.
too. And so did my mother. She was very supportive of that. So the thing is, out of that experience with my father's situation, I said, I don't want this to happen to other people,
Yeah.
have to go through this level of poverty that my mother had to do with, the six children, at the
Yeah.
age of 52, she was,
Okay.
became
So
a
it was after you're out of college, you were working for UFW, right? Representing
Yeah, no, it
workers.
was right out of law school. After law school, I
Yeah.
went to, they started to recruit, and I told my mother, I did, they came and I told my mother, they want me to go and work for the United Farm Workers, but, and you worked as a volunteer, but I said, I don't want to go out there. It's way up in Bakersfield. I said, there's hardly no men there, and I want to, eventually, I mean, I was at that time, out of law school, and I was going through thinking that I was never gonna get married, and or never have a, because right after my father uh, died, I broke up with my boyfriend that I known since college, and everybody in the family thought, which they all freaked out when I did that, because they all thought that I was gonna drop out of law school and marry, and instead I dumped the boyfriend and went off to finish law school, and so of course my relatives said, "Oh my God," especially because I'm 26 by now, something, I don't even know how old I am, but they're like, "Oh my God, she's gonna you know, like they say in Mexico, there she's destined to be a nun, or she's destined to be, yeah, that's it, going to a convent and all that. But anyway, so for me it was different. I but I did end up going to I applied to the city of San Francisco attorney's office. I don't know if I think it was had to be a public defender's or the DA's office. I'm not sure. But anyway, I applied. I had an interview. There was humongous, a lot of people interviewing, and I mean, interviewing me. And one of the questions that came up is, will you be able to be forcefully prosecute or cases of welfare fraud? And I got pissed, and I said, so you saw my record because they asked you if you'd receive welfare and everything else, and I said yes, almost since I young. And I said, you think that I'm going to be biased, that I'm not going to stand up for the law and everything if somebody commits fraud just because I receive, this. And I went on, really pissed and everything. I walked out of there and I went to a telephone. In those days, a public telephone. I called my mother and I said, you know what? I just finished this interview and I am so angry at these people. I am heading on to Bakersfield and see about the UFW and see what they say. So I arrived in the UFW. I got the honor to be interviewed personally by Cesar Chavez. Once I told him my parents were farm workers, he was so excited. He was like, oh my gosh, let me just tell you about, this is my dream. This is what I want, the children to go this. And he was going on and on talking about his dream. And I'm like, God, I wish you would be quiet. So I can tell you that that's exactly my dream too. And then that we're going, then you will be so impressed with me. For sure, I'll get the job. Even though, believe it or not, the job was being a volunteer for the UFW. That meant that you did not get paid. You got $15 per week. And in order to get reimbursed for those $15, you had to show receipts. But they paid if you had some outstanding bills. Like, for example, like my student loans, they paid my student loan a little bit of money and all that, but it was more like, but in the end reality, in cash, it was $15. And then they told us to hook up with what is it called, with the agency at that time was called the Agricultural Labor Relations Board. It's the agency that stands between the growers and workers, farm workers. And this is the agency that's supposed to be neutral, where they said hook up with one of those investigators because they got money. So say that you're working on a case and then they'll buy you lunch or something like that, right? They would tell us all these little tricks. But anyway, let me just tell you a little bit more about what was going on in my life too. Is that I came out of college and went into law school and was already doing, like I said, sit-ins. As a matter of fact, I did a sit-in at the Hastings, and I even called KBBF, who was to say that many years later I would be the president of the board of KBBF. But I was in my second year, I think, of law school, and we were trying to fight a case, and I called first I called my mother to tell her to borrow $100 from my tia Chuy, her sister. And my mother goes, what for? And I said, because I'm going to get arrested and I need $100 to get bailed out. And my mother goes, okay. My mother would never get hysterical about it. She simply would say, okay, I'll go and borrow the money, and everything else. And then I called KBBF, and there was a guy on the air, on the air, and I said, put me on the air right now. I'm going to tell you what's going on here, and this is what we're fighting at the demands we're demanding from the administration of the law school and all of this. So because of that, we ended up we want some of that. But what was so incredible is that one of the young men later told me that he goes, I remember that when you said, "Oh, I have to leave now because here comes all the police," and he said I could hear the steps coming in. He goes, I was so frightened for you, but you hung up, and but anyway, we ended up you know winning some stuff. But in all of that, what also happened with me is that I started to hate white people. I became a strong nationalist, Chicana, I don't like white people and that's it. And even very narrow-minded in some, and all that. So I just went off to the United Farm Workers, went to work for brown people because they were like me, and started working. And during the process while I'm there, they told me that there was a white guy from uh, that worked for the Agricultural Labor Relations Board, and he was an investigator that was very pro worker, pro UFW, and he was a white guy from Alabama, and he was investigating at that time when I went to work for the United Farm Workers in San Imperial Valley by El Centro by the border. There was a lot of violence. One person had already been killed, and so they asked me. They said he's coming over. That's where he was stationed, and they said he's coming over and he's already interviewed the growers. And because this guy was a guy with a southern accent, he would go up later. I learned he would go up to the growers and say, "Hey, you all hate Mexicans, don't you?" And they go, "Yeah, we hate those Mexicans and everything. You all treat them bad like this. Yeah. Do you beat them up? Yeah, those Mexicans." And he, all, not knowing this, these growers were given all this evidence, and he was writing the complaint, to file. But he needed now the story of the farm workers. So they asked me, you need to translate for this guy, you need to translate and because he doesn't know Spanish. And I said, hell no. Any white person that wants to kind of work with farm workers or Mexican people need to learn Spanish. I'm not going to translate. You're not going to make me. And they said, if you, like my supervisor said, I'm picking up the phone, I'm calling Cesar Chavez, the brother Cesar, and I'm going to have him tell you that you need to do this. And I go, okay, never mind. I knew Cesar enough to know. Okay, never mind. I will do it. So here comes this guy, white guy, and he's sitting next to me, and we're in a little room, and here comes the farm workers, and I'm translating to them, and I turn around, and he's like going like this, looking at, and I said, "Excuse me, start writing. I'm so busy. I have so many cases to do myself. I don't want to be translating here." So anyway, he goes, "Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay." And then again, about the third time, I noticed he was doing this. So I always say this to kids, when young people. I go, I don't know about the guys, but I said, sisters, ladies, um, when you just feel a little tingling. I said, I feel a little tingling. I turned around and I said, I didn't say it, I thought it. That is a fine, good-looking white boy, you know? And I was like, oh my gosh, right after I came out of there, I went out, I went and called my mother and I said, oh my God, Mom, I'm falling in love. This is how quickly I felt something, said, I'm falling in love with them. And I use that word, in Spanish. It's kind of like saying the F gringo, in Spanish. And my mom goes, "Ay, mija, man, don't be racist, don't be racist." And my mother always believed in falling in love at first sight because that's what she did with my father. So of course she knew that. So anyway, so we did cases together and everything else. We probably had one of those kind of novel romantic that one would say that he would have a yellow pad and he would have a yellow pad and he would go, hey, Alicia, I have these cases I found out, because he was also a lawyer by now. He goes, I have some cases I found for you that you can use on your cases you're working right now. Here, do you want to read them? And then he would give me a piece of paper, and in the piece of paper would say, "I'm available tonight. Do you wanna go out?" And I would say, "Oh, you know what? I think tonight I'm going to be able to read this case." And so he would know that I would know I have a place to meet him, right? We had a secret. We had the best secret. Nobody even knew that. But here's the thing. I am a person that believes in science. And so what real quickly I ended up uh, one day when driving from El Centro to Santa Rosa, I'm driving on Highway 5, and there I see we were on our way to Mexico to take my mom to Mexico to say bye to my father's family because my dad had already passed away. Um, and then so I'm driving by myself alone to Santa Rosa, and I see a sign on Highway 5. There's a big sign that I never noticed before, and my parents and I used to take trips on that. Never noticed it, but this time I noticed it, and I go, "Oh my God!" And the name of that town is called Newman, and that's this guy's name was Newman Strawbridge, and so all of a sudden I got home and I told my mother, "That's it, you know, this is the man I'm gonna marry. That's it. We're gonna go to Mexico. When we come back, I'm gonna go and write a letter to Cesar Chavez saying that, and we had been dating him and that, but I said that just a few times we're going out. But anyway, so I said, that's it. And I wrote a letter, and I still have the letter that I sent to Cesar Chavez saying, I'm leaving the United Farm Workers Union because I have found a partner. I'm going to marry this man who, like you said, has the same beliefs that you and I have. And that is that we don't just provide services for people or farm workers. We are servants of the in fighting, justice and injustices in life. And anyway, so all I did was I did that, and I sent the letter out, and got called and says did not even want to talk to me. He was so angry that I was leaving, and he my supervisor called me and she asked, "Who's this guy?" And I said, "I won't tell you because it's a secret." And they said, "No, go ahead, tell us. We'll never tell anybody. I will not tell anybody." And of course I said, "Okay, his name is Newman Strawbridge." And they go, "Oh my God, you're kidding." He was, he worked for the state, in a sense. And so all of a sudden, they ended up coming in, people coming a few days later, coming in and saying, "Congratulations, Alicia." And I go, "Oh, did we win a case?" And in Salinas, they call Newman and they say, "Hey, Newman, congratulations." And then he goes, "Why, did we win a case?" The same thing. And he goes, "No, did you and Alicia are getting married?" And I almost passed out when they told me. I picked up the phone. We had a secret way of getting in touch with each other, and I called and I said, "I never want to see you again. That's it." And the reason for that is that he had not even asked me to be his girlfriend, and I had already packaged the whole thing that we were getting married and everything else. But it turns out that we did get married. We produced an incredible child named Salvador Strawbridge, Salvador Sanchez Strawbridge, and he's known here in Santa Rosa as Pocho One photography. He does photography, and he's the one that gave us a daughter. But in the process, the thing with all of this is that one of the things that I always tell people, Newman taught me, is that Newman taught me, he's my political mentor. He taught me that it wasn't color. He says, "I look blonde and blue eyes, but I look like the rich people in this country, the ruling people class, but I'm not. I'm like you. The color does not matter in the sense of us, that discrimination shouldn't be because of color, We should talk about class, that there is a difference and all that." He became my political mentor. He's the one that expanded my horizons. We came in 1986 here to Santa Rosa. And I then want to talk about my life here in Santa Rosa. He and I organized the first industrial union with a whole group of people, a lot of people, the first industrial union. And during that time, we also ended up divorcing. and we divorced because we both are so much alike. Uh, we both knew that we needed to have someone opposite of us, that because we love to save the world and don't know how to be, husband and wife or whatever. We are more like, compañeros in the movement, which is like comrades, co-workers, whatever. So in that process, I ended up we ended up divorcing. But during that process, we did with a group of us founded the Sonoma County Industrial Union, which I don't know if you want to ask me a question because I can keep going.
So you're saying we got to pay more attention to street signs as we're driving, right? That was your sign. Well, I think that's what I want to hear a little bit about is when you got here in '86 and a little bit about the, before it gets too late here, but
yes, I know.
about
Oh my God, it's already, yes.
yeah,
Yes,
5 or 10 minutes.
real quickly, five minutes.
And we can take a few questions, but I think we want to hear a little bit about that, the Workers Center and
Yes.
the formulation of that and what some of the issues you were dealing with when you got back here, what the crux of it.
And one of the things about that, about the industrial union when we came is Newman wanted, he said, the Mexican worker, and like I always say, it's a white guy from Alabama. He was involved in the civil rights in the South and all. So he kept saying, here in California, the vanguard of the workers of the labor movement is Mexican workers. We need to organize them. And he knew that, I loved organizing. I became a community organizer first and loved it. It was so wonderful to see the empowerment of that people took the power on and did something. And that's when I decided to leave law many years before, because I found out that I couldn't deal with, one-on-one saving one life when everybody could save themselves. And, in a sense, I was just guiding them. So anyway, Newman kept saying, let's talk about workers now, the labor movement. So we finally, a group of us formed the industrial union, Sonoma County Industrial Union. It was an independent union. We weren't affiliated yet with anyone. And I want to just tell a real quick story about this. When we were in a meeting, how the Sonoma County Industrial Union was born, was that we were in a meeting and one of the women goes, how do we form a union? And Newman said, oh, you have to make a motion and then we can start. And so I translated it to tienes que hacer una moción, which, literally I said, like, you need to make a motion, right? And so the woman was sitting, and finally said, come on, say something. And the woman finally just jumped out of her chair, and she went like this, raised her hand and said, ¿Me siguen? Do you follow me? And everybody, the rest of the women jumped up and said, yes, sí. And so what I didn't realize is that I later asked her, why did it take so long? She goes, because you told me to make a movement. And I was trying to think, what kind of a movement can I do to portray that I wanted to, were asked to join the movement. And that was the born of the Sonoma County Industrial Union. We had fishery workers. I viewed it, of all my 30 years of union organizing and being a union rep, is that I viewed that period in my life that took 3 years for us to get a union contract for Point St. George Fisheries here in Santa Rosa, and became the first contract among predominantly Mexican workers and 75% women, 75% women. And I view it as that I feel the most proud, because we developed so many leaders among all the women who later on, the predominantly women. And also, so it was during that time that, that I also, because of NAFTA, some of them went across the border, the companies, and they dissolved the fishery, made sure it let itself go so that it could close down and open someplace else. So then we turn in that, we asked the workers, what do you want to do now? There is no union, but shouldn't we form a workers center? And we did. And I said, what do you want? And they said, we would like to learn English. It was during the amnesty period and people needed to become U.S. citizens. So we formed a workers center there in Corby Avenue, where actually that's also where KBBF is now. So it's like a place, been part of my life all this time. So out of there, I wanted to say that, we kept that there were sometimes at night there would be about 400 or more workers that would come to learn English. Workers and other people from the neighborhood, they would go in the parking lot would be absolutely full with because people would come and learn English, and we started to do GED classes. Even later with time, computer classes a little bit, but anyway, mostly it was English as a second language, and so we are really proud of that kind of work that we did.
Yeah.
And also one of the things too is that we got these workers not to just think that they were union workers, but that they had to be a community activist. They had to be politically aware of what's going. So we joined the peace movement. We joined other movements, against the war. We marched. We did all these things, and they became aware. They became aware of other other struggles, and we would join them. We would join them all
Yeah.
to try to they would have a wider awareness of it.
Yeah. Well, since you've been doing this for a long time, so what keeps you going?
Oh, well,
What keeps your energy so high?
yeah, no, I love that. One thing I want to say, that, I've said this before to me, one of the things that for me, I've been very, very blessed. I've been blessed, especially in that I've been so supportive in all my struggles that I've done. So my passion that I have to go to fight for, for justice, for equality, for peace, all of them have been because I've had, my partner, my first partner is the one that opened my eyes to what to think more broadly. And but then I also have right now my incredible husband. We've been now almost 29 years of marriage. My husband, Bernie Hupton, who's on this here on this meeting, he's the one that's been very supportive of me. I want to tell a story real quickly because of how I met this incredible man. And that is that after I stopped the grieving of the death of my first marriage, I sat down, and after I got over the grieving and all that, I then made a list and I said, I really don't need to have a man in my life, but it's worth trying to go for it. So what I did is I ended up what I did is I made a list, and I put down in the list, I made what are the two most important things I need in order for me to make sure that in life I continue to do my passion, my work. And one of them was that I said, what I need to do is I wrote, what I need in a man is, one, he has to know how to cook. Number one. Two, he's got to know how to use a hammer. He's got to be a handyman, because even though my first partner was brilliant, he didn't know how to do any of those two things. And so I said, no, I need this, you know. And so what I did is, because I was a union activist, I called all my brothers, union brothers, my brothers, the carpenters, the laborers. When I said, whenever you have any activities, call on me to go to the party or whatever, I want to go. And so when I would go to an event, I would walk up to someone I found attractive, assuming that they fulfilled the number two part, the number two thing of being a handyman. So I would go and ask them, hey, brother, do you know how to cook? And they said, they would go, well, I barbecue. Well, barbecue doesn't cut it. So to make it short, I met Bernie at a study group, and I went up, and he had some Norwegian cookies, and he said, oh, these are it. And I said, oh, that's good, nice, and everything else. And I said, well, do you like to cook? I noticed that you like to bake. Do you like to cook? And he goes, oh yeah, I do. And I said, oh, like baker and all this other stuff, bakery and everything. He goes, no, he goes, I like, I actually like to cook. I said, do you like to barbecue? And he goes, no, I actually like to cook every day. And he said, okay, well, then I said, oh, that's wonderful. And I said, but I always tell people, I always ask the next question. Everybody always thinks I ask, like, oh, are you a handyman? And I go, I'm not that quickly to get to it. I said, your wife must love your cooking. And he said, no, I've been divorced for 1 year. And so I went like this in my head, ding, number one. So then after a while, we dated for a while. And then one day I asked him to come and actually he bought me this incredible big poster and I couldn't put it up on the walls. That's where Calvin lives, Santa Rosa Commons. But so I asked Bernie, he was behind me, and I said, can you put it up for me, please? I've been trying to put it up, but they need special nails. And he said, no, I can't do it. And I go, and he said, because I don't have the right tools. I have them at my house, and I will come and bring them tomorrow and get that for you. And in my head, I went, ding, two. And in Spanish, I always say this because this is a thought the kid. Este arroz ya está cocido, which means this rice is already cooked. So I knew that was the thing, but I still wasn't sure if this was the right man. So I made a trip to Washington to do a keynote speaking engagement. And on the way, I looked out the window of the bus as I was going into the woods. It was like a retreat. And on the side of the road, I passed a warehouse and it said Bernie's. I don't know what the rest was. It was too fast. It said Bernie. I came back and I told Bernie, that's it. You and I are getting together. That's the end of that. That's the last time my honey Bernie had any say so as to our relationship. And the reason I say that he's the one that keeps on going is because he has done a lot of sacrifice in raising our second. I came up to him and also told him, I'm gonna pop a baby out for you, and you're gonna take care of it. And thank God it was a little boy named my second son named Joshua Hovden, and Bernie's the one that made it possible for me to continue my work and not ever feel guilty that I was neglecting my children or anything else, but had always been the most supportive person. But I would say that the other two people that just keep me going is my father always believing in me. My father, and I always talk about the story about crossing the river and how he kept saying, always never give up, keep going forward. And also what I said about in the 2017 Women's March, when I told the story about me divorced, and after my divorce, how scared I was, thinking that I wasn't going to make it, being alone, handling the union and all of that, and how I kneeled down and prayed. And all of a sudden, when I got up, I said, I'm not a wife, I'm not a mother, I'm not an activist, I'm not a sister, I'm not, a daughter. And what is it that makes me strong? And I said to myself, it's because I am a woman. And that's what makes me strong. And that's what keeps me going. And that's I am fulfilling the dream my father said, and that is that, we as women are keys and we have to go forward, but always be respectful of other people.
Yeah.
We are the key.
Yeah.
Social media.
That's fantastic. And I think you make us all kind of hopeful and inspired with your energy. So we're getting late. Maybe it's time, if anyone, since we're kind of a smaller group, if you want to ask a question or anything, please, you can unmute yourself and go for it if you like. But Alicia, that was wonderful. So I really appreciate your your energy and your sharing with us.
Alicia, it's so good to see you. Thank you for being here for our program.
Thank you.
Yeah, I always love hearing everything you have to say. So there are some urgent issues going on now with the pandemic and racial injustice, and all of these things that are really impacting our lives. And I'm particularly concerned about the number of people who are infected with coronavirus and the deaths in the Latino community. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts, any in words of wisdom for us. What can we do to help?
Well, for me, I think one of the things that is going to be really important is I feel that, and even among ourselves, is that I think the, the movement right now of Black Lives Matter is key for us to make sure to support this movement. And in the process, it's not that we're neglecting, any our own race or our own people or whatever, but Black Lives Matters is the movement right now that we all need to support. I always feel like that for us, we need to, that when the least of our people get some equality, we all benefit from it. And when I used to be organizing workers, I used to tell white workers, look, Mexican workers are here in the bottom, and if you help us improve their lives, I said, brothers, you uh, will never fall off the platform. And on the contrary, if you help us here, we will raise the platform up and you will benefit from it. So I feel right now that for me, Black Lives Matters is something that we should devote ourselves to in this sense of helping with this, being in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. And at the same time, we are also going to benefit from it, especially I know that with us in the Latino community right now, we are focusing on trying to educate our community, and especially because we have at KBBF, we're trying to do certain programs right now. They're going to be very critical of having us not only understand the big global thing of inequality that's going on, but and that the attack is not only on Latinos and Blacks, but it's people of color, indigenous right now, and not be so scared of trying to being caught up in in being distracted from this pandemic that's going on right now. I feel like right now what we need to do is really listen to people and ask them questions as to why is it, and especially among the Latinos, why is it that you do not want to wear a mask? Why is it that you feel that if somebody's going to test you, for or give you, just to check your whether it's to give you an injection or something, you think that they're infecting you with a virus, or they're putting in your mouth or something. Right now we have in Mexico, in the Latinx community, very big serious issues of people not trusting God, trusting doctors, not trusting, coming up with this conspiracy issues that are different from what the other people view it as conspiracy, but that this is something that they're afraid to go to hospitals, because until they're so sick, and as it is, we always, even George Lopez once that made a joke, and it wasn't a joke, but it's the truth. When he said, with us Mexicans, we say, oh, me duele, this hurts. We always, oh, don't go to the doctor, man. He's going to tell you something's wrong, So, that kind of thing we have to break away. We have people right now who are afraid to, when they're testing you to see your oxygen level, they're afraid that if they think that that the doctors are trying to get their digital fingerprint. So we have to do a lot of education among ourselves and all that. But in the same time, I want us to not forget the bigger picture of equality that we're trying to get equality to, not like I always tell our brothers, we right now, our biggest issue right now is that COVID. And of course, the biggest issue too right now is immigration issues, workers' rights, the economic injustice. But we gotta try to put it in a way that it's not just a focus on saying, like working only toward, fixing one problem with, the Latino X community or something, but for us to come together and realize that this is really a problem for me. The way I view it is simply, of the capitalist system that we have, the inequality that we have, the racism that's being used to divide and conquer us, that we gotta go deeper and trust that the community, if you talk to them, if you listen to them, that they will come up with the solutions, that we need to move forward.
Great, thank you so much.
That's great. Well, all right. I think that was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so much, Alicia.
Oh, there's somebody. Is she waving her hand? This lady?
Oh, she's clapping.
Oh, she's clapping. I couldn't tell what it is. No, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me again and, spending the time with me here. And it's wonderful to see, especially see all of you. So wonderful.
Yeah.
It was a special gift to me to see people I haven't seen for a while. And so, yeah. So especially, like I said, thank you so very, very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Alicia.
Take care.
Thank you all.
All right. Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Take care.
Take care. Good
Sí se puede, remember.
night. Yeah.